Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Smaulgld speculation series. Today we're going to be talking about plans that central banks have to try and stop cryptocurrencies. How central banks intend to fight cryptocurrencies? Well, the president of the Deutsche Bundesbank has some ideas, and he made his remarks last week at the Bundesbank Policy Symposium in a speech entitled Frontiers in Central Banking, Past, Present, and Future. But what if these plans fail? We'll have a discussion on that. Let's take a look at the cryptocurrency challenges to central banks and the response that they may be planning. Now, cryptocurrencies trade outside the banking system, and they are attracting more and more capital. And governments and central banks are devising ways, or trying to devise ways, to stop or control their rise. Last week in Cryptocurrency's Fiat Killers or Strengtheners, we noted how some Ethereum projects aim to make blockchain assets spendable through the banking system via connecting them to Visa and MasterCard. And in another story we broke last week, a bill would require a declaration of digital currency holdings at the border. In that blog post, we noted that the U.S. Congress has asked the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security and the Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection to devise a plan to stop flows of cryptocurrencies into the country. Now, just last week at the Bundesbank Policy Symposium, in a speech entitled Frontiers in Central Banking, Past, Present, and Future, Dr. Jens Weidmann, president of the Deutsche Bundesbank and chairman of the board of the director of the Bank of International Settlements, gave a speech outlining some of his ideas on how to best address the challenges that cryptocurrencies pose to central banks. And there's four of them right there: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero, and Ethereum. Here's the plan. So in this speech, he explains that central banks are creatures born of a crisis, in that they were designed to come to the rescue whenever there was a financial crisis. And Dr. Weidmann noted that market interventions by central banks often provide financial stability, but not without creating additional risks. And towards the end of the speech, Dr. Weidmann remarked that policy intervention may be required not to address a crisis this time, but to address technology. Digitalization has the potential to provide financial benefits to the economy, with the risk, however, of disintermediating central banks. That's the main issue they have. As such, the ability of central banks to conduct monetary policy diminishes proportionally to the increase of digitalization. So, Dr. Weidmann dismissed the notion that these privately issued digital currencies would eliminate central bank currencies, although the thought must have crossed his mind. He was reasoning that central banks are better able to deliver price stability than a rigid monetary rule or an algorithm. Be that as it may, he still is concerned about the rise of cryptocurrencies. And for one consideration might be that the central banks themselves would issue their own digital currencies, which is something that we saw the central banks of Russia and China are considering. If central banks create digital currencies, it would make those holding their liquid assets in the form of those digital assets, those digital currencies issued by the central bank, safer. Because according to Dr. Weidmann, central banks cannot become insolvent. So if you have your digital assets, your money, in the central bank, you're better off than having it in a private bank. And Dr. Weidmann notes, however, that in times of crisis, money holders would withdraw their bank deposits and transfer them into the official digital currencies of the central bank, thereby rapidly withdrawing liquidity from the private banking sector, in effect in a digital bank run. And without deposits, Mr. Weidmann observes, banks could not make loans. So here's what he concludes. My personal take on this is that the central banks should strive to make existing payment systems more efficient and still faster than they already are. Instant payments is the buzzword here. And he went on to say, I am pretty confident that this will reduce most citizens' interest in digital currencies. That's the plan. The central bank wants to make a better payment system, and that, he says, should most likely take people's interest, their eye off the ball of these cryptocurrencies. Here are the discussion points. 1. Will instant payment systems run by central banks render public interest in private cryptocurrencies irrelevant or keep them at the fringe. So if the central banks create these better payment systems, will that render public interest in cryptocurrencies irrelevant or keep them at the fringe? 2, what if the central banks do create these instant payment systems, but the public interest in cryptocurrencies does not abate? 3, will central banks instead, if they can't stop the rise of cryptocurrencies through fast payment systems, create their own digital currencies, as Mr. Weidman indicated they could, which would in effect kill off the private banking sector and become the banking system in their respective countries? If the central banks did that and created their own digital currencies, they would have the ability to create loans, make credit decisions, issue credits, and track all transactions. Do you think that's a possibility? Is that a good idea? And thank you very much to VJ for alerting me to Dr. Weidman's speech. You can check him out at Twitter there and also on YouTube. Let me have your comments below. Thank you very much.